for me, I think it's a combination of, those of us who are in the DEIA space as practitioners, working with our HR professionals who are in, dealing with staff care and our wellness, to really come together to figure out what are the strategies that we can put in place to help people. Both those who are, the introverts who, don't want to come back or, felt microaggression, but then also the supervisors who also need to be equipped with the tools on how to help their staff and how to help manage their staff.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the All Inclusive podcast. On today's episode, I'm joined by Neneh Diallo, Chief Diversity Officer at USAID. During the episode, Neneh shares her observations on the differences in how GenX and Millennials approach DEI, and she offers insights into how organisations can bridge the gap between these generational perspectives to create more effective DEI strategies. Neneh also highlights the critical steps that organisations can take to create sustainable change. As always, before jumping into the video, make sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on your notification bell, and follow on your favourite podcast platform so that you never miss an episode. That being said, let's jump in. Hi, Neneh.
Hi, Natasha. How are you?
Oh, I'm so good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Fine, thank you. How's it are you in London?
Yes, we are in London. And actually, you know what? Today, the weather is not too bad. The sun has been shining, which doesn't happen very often.
I was just gonna say I have family who live in London, and they're always talking about the gray skies and always trying to get me to go out there. And I'm like, I don't think so. I actually like the seasons here. You get the sun.
Yeah, I
Even if
know.
it's cold, you get the sun.
I know it is a bit, yeah, it's grey, the grey and windy city. But I would say coming in the summer months, you're more likely than not should get some more sunshine, because lately they've been really, really good. So I'd say come in the summer, if anything.
Well, I'll have to try that then.
So today we are going to be talking all things DE&I. But before we get stuck into that, I would really like you to share with us a little bit about you and tell our listeners how you have come to your journey that you are on today.
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to talk about all things diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility. We add the A to our DEI work. And tell you a little bit about myself. So my journey here has not been a straight line. I did not, study, not a DEI practitioner or technical expert in any way, shape, or form. But I am a believer and change agent, believer in that, we all live in a world where inclusion, I think, is at the heart of everything, and globalization, I think, has taught us that. Born and raised in New York to West African parents. My mom hails from Sierra Leone. My father hails from Guinea, both in West Africa. But I say that I'm a New York before I'm even an American and anything else. True and true. And I went to the United Nations International School for high school, middle and high school. And I have to say that, having that perspective growing up, not just in New York, which is a cosmopolitan international city in and of itself, and then also now going to the United Nations International School, that I was surrounded by diversity, right? And so I think that really has shaped, my perspective on, and how I, what I bring to this job and in this role. But I went to Rutgers University in New Jersey, where I studied political science. And then once I left college, really didn't know if I wanted to go into law school or what. And so I did a few internships, with a law firm, and then also did some work in entertainment, as an internship at a public relations firm. And that public relations firm is called the Terry Williams Agency. And the reason why I mentioned that agency is because it really taught me everything I needed to know in terms of building interpersonal relationships, building up that competency of people skills that are needed, I think, in this job. And it has really shaped who I am. And so I give a lot of credit to Terry Williams, who launched that agency, years ago in New York City. Give her a lot of credit to helping shape who I am as a person and, how I interact and actually getting into this space, honestly. So from there, I think my first job was at a public relations firm. Then I moved out to California, where I worked in Hollywood for a few years, and then moved back to New York, worked in the news industry at CBS News, and then met my husband, who ended up working, living in Washington, D.C. area. So I moved down here about 20 years ago. And, because Washington is almost like being in Los Angeles, where it's like a one industry town. So it's just big government. And, you end up working in the space. And I have, throughout my career trajectory, although I may have started off in public relations and, here I am in government, the trajectory, the common denominator, I should say, has always been, I think telling stories and communications, public relations, so public affairs, really, right, in the government space. So I've always kind of stuck in there. So here I am today.
Fantastic. And so how have you seen, or what's your understanding of the evolution of diversity, equity, inclusion? What would you say, how has it evolved since you started working within it?
Oh, wow. Let's see. So I started working, my entire career has been mainly, like I mentioned, in the communications, public affairs space. And I started working in DEI really in 2014, 2015. I had, married two kids, and then got pregnant with my twins. And when we went from a family of 4 to a family of 6, it completely changed
Yeah, I
the
can
trajectory of
imagine. Oh
my
my goodness.
day-to-day.
I don't even, do you know what? I'm a twin, and
Are you?
yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah, I'm a twin. And so, but my mum, I'm the only set, we're the only set of twins that my mum had. So it was just me, my sister, and my mum. And so it was our 3 little trio of girls in the house. Like, it was really fun. But I've now got a 4-year-old, and I cannot imagine having twins. Like, I mean, like, it's a gift. It's definitely a gift from God, I think it is.
It is.
But to
It
then
is.
have like 3, and then, or to have 2 kids already, and then, oh my goodness, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hats off to your mom. And I hope, now that you're a parent, you appreciate how she had double trouble on her hands, right? When you had to
100%,
deal with
yeah.
it one at a time. But yeah, no, I mean, it completely changed my life. Like, no longer, I thought like, oh, after I had my daughter, I was like, oh yeah, I got up on a plane after came back from maternity leave, and I was like, yeah, I can go to, to OECD conference in Ghana, no problem. I was still, I hope I can say this, inclusive podcast. I was still breastfeeding at the time. So
Yeah, of
imagine
course.
all that long way from, DC to Ghana. I didn't have my baby and I didn't have a breast pump. So just
Oh my
imagine
goodness, you didn't have
what
a
I was
breast
going through.
pump.
No, I did not
Oh,
have my
hand
breast pump.
pumping is
Yeah.
oh gosh, I had to hand pump,
Yes.
and for a period of time, because pumps wasn't working for me. So yeah, but no, I can, oh wow, okay, that's amazing.
Painful.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
painful. So yeah, so I said, okay, after having the twins, which was like 3.5 years later, I come back from maternity leave, same thing. I'm like, oh, just so happened to be that it was another OECD meeting. This time I was traveling to Busan, South Korea, with as part of the USAID delegation and State Department delegation, really, to Busan with the then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And I remember waking up feeling like I woke up in the hotel and said to myself, what am I doing here? Yeah, I can't do this anymore. It was too much. So anyway, so took a step back and said, all right, I need to slow down. What can I do to slow down? I really did love the mission of where I was working. It was not aid, it was another foreign aid agency called Millennium Challenge Corporation. And there was an opportunity to work in the diversity space, which is, so instead of me doing a lot of the external communications, it was more internally looking. And that had always interested me. So I said, okay, I'm interested. Let's see what this diversity and inclusion space is. At that point, then President Obama had issued the executive order for federal agencies to have a diversity and inclusion plan and a director. And so I was offered the job, and I took a leap of faith and ventured into that. So what has changed between then and now? So we talk about 2014 to now.
Yeah.
I think in terms of society, society at that point didn't really catch on to diversity and inclusion, right? It was, I think, still pretty new, right? Again, I'm not a practitioner. I have not been doing this for decades, but, at least in the government space, it was something that was new, something that we knew that we needed to pay attention to. We could not set targets, right? So in the government, you can't set targets and say, I need to reach X amount of African Americans or Hispanics or women in the workforce. What we did was we just benchmarked against what the workforce, US workforce, showed us in terms of the census as to who was in the workforce.
Yeah.
And then use that, right, as our benchmark against what we are doing. And I would say that it was a lot of work around engagement, because if we can't set the targets, then how do we make sure that we are doing the right outreach to different communities to ensure that they come in? And then what can we do to make sure that the staff who are with us now are engaged? How do we make sure that they're that they are empowered in their work? So for me, I think back then, the way that diversity, equity, and inclusion has evolved is literally that things have become more complex over time. So initially it was diversity and inclusion when President Obama issued his executive order, and then it has slowly evolved to include equity. And then now people have included, some agencies are using belonging, or even the private sector is about belonging. And it's about accessibility, right? To ensure that we are truly capturing our entire world. Diversity, I think, a lot of people stop at diversity and they think it's about race, and it's so not just about race. It is about gender. It is about LGBTQI plus issues. It is about people with disabilities. It is about religious minorities or anybody, religious groups. It is also diversity of thought. So, over time, those of us in this space have to recognize that DEIA or DEIB or DEIAB, it is complex, and it is about the intersectionality of identity and the real need to create environments that really honor people's various identities and lived experiences. I think that's how it has evolved. For me, as I mentioned, I attended the United Nations International School, and I've made lifelong friends from around the world. As a native New Yorker, diversity, I was born into diversity, right? As with parents who, hail from West Africa, I literally would code switch. It's, you are living with your life as a New Yorker outside, and you come home and you know that you're in an African home where you are eating the food and, hearing the language and, just embraced in that. And so for me, I bring that to, I think, my job. And so, for example, here at USAID, again, we want to make sure that we are centering the voices of everyone here. Being an international aid organization, we work around the world, and we work with, walking the halls at aid, you are seeing people from different backgrounds. How can we be more intentional with that? And I think that's where we're at right now at USAID, being a bit more intentional with diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, and belonging, right? Again, for some. And not just within USAID, but I think this administration in particular wants us to be a bit more intentional when we say diversity, equity, and inclusion. What does that mean? And how are we ensuring that we are embedding that in everything that we do?
Oh, fantastic. No, I think I agree with you. I feel like it's definitely come a long way in the recent years, and we know that with the tragic events with George Floyd, that was a massive spark for everyone to really think
it's a paradigm
about
shift, right?
And I think it was, and also because we were in lockdown, so there wasn't anywhere you could go, like you was at home, like, so you had to face it. And people were actually like, you know what, that's not okay. what are we doing as a society? How is this even happening? So I totally agree with you that I think in the first instance we were looking at diversity, and that was a focal point, and we've definitely come a long way from moving on from that and actually thinking about more about inclusivity and accessibility, and across all, not just race and like not just the marginalized groups, but there's so much intersectionality, so it's going to touch everybody. um what I wanted to hear from you actually is, because I think there's a lot of conversation. We talk about race, we talk about the LGBT plus A community, we talk about the disabled community, so accessibility. But I'm interested to hear, what about, we've got ageism, so you've got like the different Gen Zs, the Gen X's, the Millennials, the
We've got at
Boomers.
least 4 or 5 different generations in the workplace now, right? Yeah, Boomers, Generation X, Millennials, Gen Z. Is there a Gen Y?
I think
I feel
there
like
is a
there's a
Gen
Gen.
Y. Yeah, I think there is Gen
Yeah,
Y. Like
yeah.
there's so many generations now that are kind of working in the workplace all at the same time. So how
Mhm.
have you observed the differences in how kind of Gen X and millennials approach diversity, equity, inclusion?
It's a very good question. Literally yesterday in my staff meeting, I was telling my staff, I was like, my leadership team, that I wanted to make sure that I want to set up a time to meet with our interns, because I believe Gen, they're probably the Gen Y um, generation, because I wanted to learn from them. I want to learn from them. I think, if we're just talking about Gen X, I'm part of Gen X, the generation that does not get spoken about a lot. People talk about boomers, people talk about millennials, people are not talking about Gen X, and we are definitely one to speak to, because I think we're the ones who've been caught in the middle of the shift of what's happening in the world and the cultural shift that's taking place in society. Um, so while Gen X and I think millennials may approach DEIA differently, I do believe that both generations truly recognize the importance of creating diverse and inclusive workplaces. From my experience, Gen X tends to put a bit more value on, hard work, individualism, merit-based systems, right? Not to say that millennials don't believe in hard work, but I think that there is a more socially conscious awareness that millennials bring to the workplace that Gen X doesn't, for example, and Gen X and probably boomers, right? They are more likely to advocate for inclusive practices, like hybrid work. They're more, apt to say, hey, I will not work for an organization because they do not align, their values don't align with my values, right? And I think that's commendable. That should be commendable. I actually truly um, really appreciate that about them, because while Gen X might say, hey, you know what? It is what it is. It's the workplace, it's the culture,
Well, this is it.
you know.
I think that generation, because I'm Gen Z as well. I'm Gen
Mhm,
Z, so it's like the next following on generation to yourself. And
mhm,
I think at the start, I think we had very much tunnel vision when it came to work, right? It was, okay, where am I going in my career? What organization do I need to work for to get for, so that I can be successful? We weren't really asking the questions of who are their customers? How do they contribute to the world? What sort of imprint are they making? What's the culture like? Like, I mean, if there was a couple of good people in my team, fantastic, I'll stick around. Do you know what I mean? Like, if my
right,
manager was
right.
okay, they just needed to be okay, then it'll be fine. Whereas now I feel like the millennials are asking those big questions right at the beginning when they're
At the
sitting in the
beginning, yes.
interview, rather than,
Hmm.
no, I'm not going to accept this job, and just wait and find out and see whether everything's okay. They're
Hmm.
really being a lot more vocal, and I agree. It's commendable. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. If anything, in the interviews, they're probably asking a lot more questions than I know
Mhm.
I did when I was in interviews. It's like, okay, I'll ask a question about the work, but they are more apt to ask the questions about the culture. What is the work culture like there? Can I, do remote work? Can I, what's the what's what would I be able to, the flexibilities around the workplace? Definitely care, millennials care more about that, I think, than Gen X would. But I'm very curious I do believe that, while we are in this multi-generational workplace and there is a desire, at least from my end, for we Gen X or boomer managers to, learn how to manage to the millennials and Gen Y, that I do think, to be fair about inclusivity here, it's a two-way street.
Yeah, definitely. Because
The
I
younger
mean,
generation also has to learn how to manage up, right? And so that way there's a mutual understanding, because it can't just always be one way.
no, I agree. And I mean, that was my next question. Really, is that how do you bridge the gap?
I mean, for me, I think organizations need to foster a culture of open communication and collaboration. I think, like I mentioned, there's a lot that we can learn from each other. And I think that, for those of us who are in the managerial positions of supervisors, we really have to create a culture or an environment for psychological safety, right? With everything that we've been through over the last, 3-4 years now, has it been? Again, from the start of the George Floyd murder and the social, racial and social justice unrest that we've had, I think not just here in America, but I think, globally. And then I think what we just experienced with COVID, I mean, let's really put this into perspective. Had anybody told us 15, 20 years ago that we would have experienced a period where we would be on lockdown for practically 3 months, I think I would have laughed it off and said that only happens on TV and movies, right? But it happened. And we have been sitting down in our rooms, in our bedrooms, or in our home offices with our families or not with our families, and having to deal with work and having to deal with making sure that our children or our families or our elders are safe, or that we are safe, or that if somebody gets sick, like what that does to us when COVID first started, right? There's a lot that we went through as a society. And I think we need to give ourselves grace for that. That's one. And now that, the world is open back up again and we're coming back and returning into the office, we're still in this hybrid mode. When we're talking about bringing people back into the office, that psychological safety that people probably felt, who maybe have felt microaggressions when they were in the workplace, now felt really safe behind the camera. Well, now we're asking them to come back in or to turn on their cameras. How are we ensuring that we're creating that psychological safety for them? Having that open and safe environment, really empowers our staff, me, everybody, my peers and colleagues, to show up as their whole self, and gives them the capacity to develop and implement effective, employee engagement strategies. It's not just business as usual. It can't just be, oh, we've come back and pretend that nothing ever happened. Lockdown happened for 3 years.
Yeah, it was a long time. Yeah.
That's nothing. That's not like little time. I mean, your 4-year-old, her personality has changed from the time that she was born until now, from the time she could walk until now. So the same thing has probably happened with human beings. My children in their cohort, when they went back to school, there were so many issues that teachers had to deal with because of what we went through. And I don't think that enough attention has been paid, to that when it comes to the adults and coming back into the workforce and really creating that psychological safety. So for me, I think it's a combination of, those of us who are in the DEIA space as practitioners, working with our HR professionals who are in, dealing with staff care and wellness, to really come together to figure out what are the strategies that we can put in place to help people. Both those who are, the introverts who, don't want to come back or, felt microaggression, but then also the supervisors who also need to be equipped with the tools on how to help their staff and how to help manage their staff.
I think it's a key thing really, is to making sure that you're really touching everyone, every part of the organization at every level with
Exactly.
with these initiatives and programs and any changes that you're making,
Right.
because it literally impacts everyone all at the same time, all in a different way,
Exactly.
and it's not easy work. It's a lot of work. So, and we know that there's a lot of practitioners, DEI practitioners, DEI leaders that unfortunately have left their roles because it's too much. So how do you think organizations can really support their leaders in order for them to be able to continue doing this great work?
Oof, that's a very, very good question. So there are lots of factors that contribute to the attrition. And the emotional labor that you mentioned is huge. Not having enough support. There was a recent Forbes article that talked about how, DEI leaders wish that they could clone themselves. And, we're constantly talking in this office, like we need to clone ourselves. And luckily, USAID has hired advisors across the agency who work in the diversity space to help, their respective bureaus and offices. And we've got a fantastic program in our HR division, called Staff Care, that is also there to help support people. But I think the emotional toll that is on the DEI practitioners in particular is because right now everything has become DEIA, right? Return to work. We need to make sure that we are considering the DEIA factors. There's some staff don't feel safe in certain countries because of rollback of some human and civil rights. It becomes a DEIA issue. Not that it shouldn't be, but more things have fallen under the DEIA umbrella than before.
Yeah.
And so, for me, I think it's really, really critical that people understand that DEIA is everyone's responsibility and that we all have to work together. It is about leading with inclusion. And I think once leaders and managers lead with inclusion, then they embody DEIA. You won't even need these positions, right? Or hopefully you wouldn't need as many of them. But it is the kind of work that really needs a very meticulous, inclusive approach to ensuring that we are, again, institutionalizing this everywhere, where it does become everybody's responsibility and that people recognize that it is their responsibility. So organizations can support their DEI leaders by providing them with the resources, support and recognition that they need to succeed to really make a lasting impact. People are getting triggered by DEIA right now, for good or bad reasons, I don't know. But DEIA is not a bad thing. This is not a zero-sum game. This is about making sure that we are increasing opportunities for people. This is about making sure that we are, creating an environment where people feel respected, they feel safe, they feel included, they feel empowered, and that there's that, again, psychological safety. So that's not just the role of my office or my team or me. That's the role of everybody. You want to create an environment where your staff feel empowered and engaged, and you want them to be productive, and to deliver on and create impact. Then create that environment for them. It cannot be to the person who has the DEIA in their title. It's not their job. It's all of our jobs. And so I think, with the high attrition rate in the space, I think it's because people are looking to that one sole person who probably doesn't have enough resources to do their job. And that's why we're seeing that attrition. So if you want to hold on to your, chief diversity officers or your DEIA specialists or DEIA program managers, give them the resources that they need, and also check in on them and make sure they're doing okay. Because not only are they doing the work for the people to help your staff and your employees thrive, but they don't get to necessarily take this work home, because they go home and then they've got to create that environment for themselves and for their families, and then are hearing all the, sometimes the negative talk in the news that is working against this. And so I think, especially here in the US, I'm not sure what it's like in the UK right now, but it's tough because we don't ever seem to kind of get to remove ourselves from it. So,
Yeah.
I'm constantly telling my staff, take space and take grace for yourself, and take time to make sure that you are taking care of yourself too.
Yeah, because no, it's very similar here. it's hard. Like you're fighting the good fight, but yeah, you're getting hit from from the left field. Like no. So yeah, it can be quite difficult, and I agree with you. It's so important that actually it's everyone's job to create that inclusive environment. And what I was actually going to ask for you personally, like, so is there anything that you found along the way that's really helped you?
So for me, I think, again, I bring it back to communication. So it goes back to, like, my experience in that I shared earlier. Conversation. Like, I'm not afraid of having conversations with people who don't think like me. I actually welcome that, right? I
Mm,
actually think in our society that's what we're missing here. We're so tunnel vision. So whether it's the news that you watch, you're continually just watching that news that's going to give you the information that you're looking for, that confirms your own bias in thinking. I actually welcome different thinking. I welcome having conversations. I'm going to be, as part of a newsletter series that we publish here monthly, I'm going to start a video conversation series where, probably doing like what you're doing here, where I'm inviting people, from within the agency, maybe outside of the agency, to not just talk about things that are, I think, where we're trying to find ways where we agree on everything,
yeah.
but let's have the conversation where we don't agree, so that way we can come to an understanding, because I think that we can still do that in society, right? I'm not trying to be a kumbaya thing. I don't believe that, everybody, we all must get along and we all must think the same way, but we should be able to come together because of our differences,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We all don't have the same ideology. That would be a very boring world if it was. But it doesn't mean that because we think differently that we must continuously be at war or be in conflict. So let's come together and have that. So that is actually a project that I'm working on, that I'm looking forward to
I
to
think it's
to uh
important.
to embarking on.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, it is
that
important.
sounds fun because, like,
Yeah,
if we're all about, we keep saying, oh, bring your full selves to work, want you to feel like you belong, like you've got a voice. Well, like, just because you're saying something different to what I'm saying doesn't mean that your voice is less smaller than mine, or mine is louder, like should be placed ahead of yours. Do you know? I totally
exactly.
agree. I think, and it's important that
Exactly.
we actually continue that messaging as well, because I think a lot of people think that with diversity, equity, inclusion, it's just about, oh, well, okay, that means like I now have to hire the black person. We're not going to be actually just hiring
Right.
the person that's right for the job. No, that's not what we're saying. We're
Exactly.
saying that
Exactly.
we're
That is
trying to
not
give
what we're saying.
everyone the equal opportunity to go for the job, because a
Exactly.
lot of black people haven't got that. So when you open the doors, you're actually probably going to find that the black person is just so happens to be a good candidate for the job. But unfortunately,
Exactly.
I don't know, it's just like, unfortunately, the way that things are working, well, the way that the world has been, is that that black person never got through the door. They weren't given the opportunity.
Exactly.
And so it's the same with being able to discuss, or if you've got a different opinion, that doesn't mean that you're not a valued contributor to the conversation. Actually, to be fair, it's probably going to be even more better, because then you can really find a real solution.
Exactly. Yes. Oh, you are so speaking my
I know
language.
this
I can talk to you forever on this.
or is that really a good thing? Maybe we should get someone else on here that's not speaking our language. But no, this has been
We
so
do that
fun.
too.
Yeah. So one of my next questions actually was, what's one of the projects that you're working on now that you're most excited about? Because I know there's a lot of work that you've been doing, and so I'd love to hear something that you're doing currently now, or have done, which has been really, really impactful.
So I guess aside from the video conversation series I just mentioned, we're doing a lot of work with academic institutions that are historically underrepresented. So whether it's working with historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, or working with Hispanic serving institutions, and working with tribal colleges and universities, working with the Native American population, and then also institutions that have a large population of our Asian American and Pacific Islander demographic communities. I am really excited about working with them because in those institutions, because they have so much to offer. One of the first schools that I witnessed an MOU signing with Administrator Samantha Power is with Alcorn State University, which is a land grants HBCU university here in the United States, the first one. And they have some of the most advanced research departments in the world, in the country. And we sent over students from Alcorn State University to Guyana, where they worked on climate mitigation risk projects with their Guyanese peers at I believe, the University of Guyana. I love that project and that portfolio of work because I get to work and highlight and connect with some of the brightest minds in the United States in these institutions that nobody's probably ever heard of or have hardly ever heard of, and giving them an opportunity to go and do some of, innovative work in some of the projects that we're working in around the globe. And for me, that is exciting because I get to not just work with them, but also elevate their voices and elevate their work so that they can be seen. And to me, like, without a doubt, if I leave here and I didn't do anything else but that work, I'd be happy.
Oh, that's amazing. I don't even know what to say because I'm like, oh, that's so inspirational, and it must be so life changing for them to be able to do that great work and then come back and just look back on how amazing and how impactful that has been for them, and that will be for the people that live there.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Some of them, just to let you know, like, some of them have already been doing this work. It's just, again, they just haven't been elevated. Nobody's known, or they're doing it, and they're doing it here in the United States, right, in their own backyards. With those students in particular, some of them have never left their communities. They're in Mississippi or other states where they may never have ever left the country or even known that this was an opportunity for them. And so we get to, I'm not trying to, this is not to downplay them, because some of them are, again, some of the most brilliant minds who've, well traveled, but there's some of them who haven't and don't even know that this is an option. So for me, get to work on that portfolio where it's like, again, opening the world, to them and introducing them to the world, but also introducing the world to them. So that way everybody gets to understand and learn from them as well. So anyway, I can't say any more about it. It just excites me a lot to see the potential that we can create here.
No, it's definitely sounds exciting, and I'm so pleased because it's more. I hope that there's more things and initiatives and programs out there that are like that, because there definitely should be, and I hope that anyone who listens to this who has room or resource to be able to create something like that, go do it, because it's definitely going to be life changing.
Absolutely.
So what would you say is one of the critical steps that an organization should take in order to create sustainable change?
One of the most critical steps is to make a long-term commitment to equity, inclusion, accessibility, and diversity. And I purposely said that in not the DEI acronym, because I don't want people to be stuck there. I think that if you lead with inclusion, you can get it right. But this really truly involves, embedding the principles of diversity, equity, inclusion into an organization's culture, its policies, its practices, and then really ensuring that it's a priority at all levels. Now, this is going to take time. It takes intentionality, it takes commitment, because change does not happen overnight. So understanding that this is a long game is really critical. And I believe that that's what has led to, a lot of the progress that we've made here at USAID. USAID has always championed inclusion. So it's the foundation. We've got, our Inclusive Development Hub that does fantastic work in the space in our programs. We have our Gender Inclusion and Women's Empowerment division that also works and has been working on, gender inclusion for years. And, we're only building stronger from that. So this is not anything that's new for AID. But what we are doing is bridging the internal, what used to be just an internal DEIA construct, with our external work and our programming, and bringing it together so that we are truly institutionalizing this. So we know and understand that what lies on the other side of the inevitable disruption and discomfort is a safer, more respectful, and more inclusive workplace. And that's what we're aiming for here.
Oh, fantastic. Would you say that, because I like the way you talk about like kind of the internal and also working on the external. Would you say that creating these initiative programs, pushing for equity and inclusion, you should only start with the internal in the first instance and then look to external, or that actually you should be doing both together at the same time?
So at USAID, and I think just in general, right, everybody's been working on their programs before D&I became a thing. And so I think if you are, let's say, a startup right now, just starting up, whatever your organization is, you should do both at the same time. And the way you do it at the same time is to say, okay, when I'm coming up with my corporate strategy, I need to make sure that DEIA is embedded in that. And that happens when you're working on your human capital strategy. DEIA should be embedded in that. What used to happen is, oh, I've got my corporate strategy. Okay, I've got my human capital strategy. Oh, okay, now let me create this D&I strategy here. That doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why diversity and inclusion historically has always been seen as this side initiative, as opposed to part and parcel of your business and your business strategy and your capital strategy. So the more you, again, are more intentional about that, you will get it right. And I'm not going to say get it right, it's going to be perfect, but at least it's a fantastic start.
Yeah, you're on the right track.
DEIA you're on the right track. DEIA can't be an afterthought. It has to be that you've got somebody who's there who's saying, okay, as we're building out this team, do we have the right people? I used to work at a place where, for example, the entire leadership, very diverse, African American, you've had women, you had other races, etc. They were all trained from Yale and Harvard. That's not diversity.
Yeah.
That's not diversity of thought at all when everybody's trained in the same vernacular. So truly building your team and building your culture and building what your organization is going to do in terms of programming, I think it should be done at the same time. One can't go before the other. Right now, we're doing a lot of retrofitting, right? And that's where we get into the debates about, merit-based. Oh, well, now we're trying to hire people, because you've hired one group that all look the same. All of a sudden now, when it's hiring different people, it becomes like, oh, well, it's no longer about merit. It's a whole affirmative action move. And that's not the case. It's to your point. We're opening up the opportunity to people who didn't even know the opportunity existed or have been historically left out for a variety of reasons. So yeah, I think that is something that has to be done together and not one first and then the other.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Neneh. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. I could really speak to you for so much longer. So for anyone who is listening, and they want to connect with you, how can they find out more about your work and connect?
Absolutely. Please visit usaid.gov. That's usaid.gov. And if you have any questions for me, you can always reach out to deia@usaid.gov.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I will be placing links to those sites below the episode. So whoever does want to learn a little bit more, they're able to do that, and also can reach out for if they've got any questions off the back of this conversation. But as I said, Neneh, I've thoroughly enjoyed our chat today, and I'm excited to see all the more great work that USAID are doing, and yourself.
Appreciate you so much, Natasha. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for having me. And anytime, I'm happy to come back.